Sometimes the native workers stole diamonds. They wrapped them in leaves and poked them up their rectums. If they got away from the big hole without being discovered, they would run. And do you know what the British did to them if they got caught before they could get over Oran Hair Riviere and into Boer country? Killed them, I suppose, he said, eyes still closed. Oh no, that would have been like junking an expensive car just because of a broken spring. If they caught them, they made sure that they would go on working. But they also made sure that they would never run again. The operation was called hobbling, Paul, and that is what I'm going to do to you. For my own safety, and yours as well. Believe me, you need to be protected from yourself. Just remember, a little pain and it'll be over. Try to hold on that thought. Terror, sharp as a gust of wind filled with razor blades, blew through the dope, and Paul's eyes flew open. She had risen and now drew the bedclothes down, exposing his twisted legs and bare feet. No, he said. No, Annie. Whatever it is you've got on your mind, we can talk about it, can't we? Please. She bent over. When she straightened up, she was holding the axe from the shed in one hand and a propane torch in the other. The blade of the axe gleamed. Written on the side of the propane torch was the word Burns-O-Matic. She bent down again and this time came up with the dark bottle and the box of matches. There was a label on the dark bottle. Written on the label was the word betadine. He never forgot these things, these words, these names. Annie, no! He screamed. Annie, I'll stay right here. I won't even get out of bed. Please! Oh God, please don't cut me. It'll be all right, she said, and her face now had that slack, unplugged look, that look of perplexed vacuity. And before his mind was completely consumed in a forest fire of panic, he understood that when this was over, she would have only the vaguest memories of what she had done, as she had only the vaguest memories of killing the children, and the old people, and the terminal patients, and Andrew Pomeroy. After all, this was the woman who, although she'd gotten her cap in 1966, had told him only minutes ago that she had been a nurse for 10 years. She killed Pomeroy with that same axe. I know she did. He continued to shriek and plead, but his words had become inarticulate babble. He tried to turn away from her, and his legs cried out. He tried to draw them up, make them less vulnerable, less of a target, and his knees screamed. Only a minute more, Paul, she said, and uncapped the betadine. She poured a brownish red muck over his left ankle. Only a minute more, and it's over. She tipped the blade of the axe flat, the tendon standing out in her strong right wrist, and he could see the wink of the amethyst ring she still wore on the pinky finger of that hand. She poured betadine on the blade. He could smell it, a doctor's office smell. That smell meant you were going to get a shot. Just a little pain, Paul. It won't be bad. She turned the axe over and splashed the other side of the blade. He could see random flowers of rust blooming on the side before the goop covered it. Annie! Annie! Oh, Annie! Please, please! No, please! Don't, Annie! I swear to you, I'll be good. I swear to God I'll be good. Please give me a chance to be good. Oh, Annie, please let me be good. Just a little pain. Then this nasty business will be behind us for good, Paul. She tossed the open bottle of betadine over her shoulder, her face blank and empty, and yet so inarguably solid. She slid her right hand down the handle of the axe almost to the steel head. She gripped the handle farther up in her left hand and spread her legs like a logger. Annie! Oh, please, please don't hurt me! Her eyes were mild and drifting. Don't worry, she said. I'm a trained nurse. The axe came whistling down and buried itself in Paul Sheldon's left leg, just above the ankle. Pain exploded up his body in a gigantic bolt. Dark red blood splattered across her face like Indian war paint. It splattered the wall. He heard the blade squeal against bone as she wrenched it free. He looked unbelievingly down at himself. The sheet was turning red. He saw his toes wriggling. Then he saw her raising the dripping axe again. Her hair had fallen free of its pins and hung around her blank face. He tried to pull back in spite of the pain in his leg and knee and realized that his leg was moving, but his foot wasn't. All he was doing was widening the axe slash, making it open like a mouth. He had time enough to realize his foot was now only held on his leg by the meat of his calf before the blade came down again, directly into the gash, shearing through the rest of his leg and burying itself deep in the mattress. Springs boinked and squoinked. Annie pulled the axe free and tossed it aside. She looked absently at the jutting stump for a moment and then picked up the box of matches. She lit one. Then she picked up the propane torch with the word Burns-O-Matic on the side and twisted the valve on the side. The torch hissed. Blood poured from the place where he no longer was. Annie held the match delicately under the nozzle of the Burns-O-Matic, and then there was a floof sound. A long yellow flame appeared. Annie adjusted it to a hard blue line of fire. "Can't sit her," she said. "No time. Tourniquet's no good. No central pressure point. Got to rinse. Cauterize." She bent. Paul screamed as fire splashed over the raw and bleeding stump. Smoke drifted up. It smelled sweet. He and his first wife had honeymooned on Maui. There had been a luau. This smell reminded him of the smell of the pig when they brought it out of the pit where it had cooked all day. The pig had been on a stick, sagging, black, falling apart. The pain was screaming. He was screaming. "Almost over," she said, and turned the valve, and now the ground sheet caught fire around the stump that was no longer bleeding. The stump that was as black as the pig's hide had been when they had brought it out of the luau pit. Eileen had turned away, but Paul had watched, fascinated, as they pulled off the pig's crackling skin as easily as you might skim off a sweater after a football game. "Almost over." She turned the torch off. His leg lay in the line of flames with his severed foot wavering beyond it. She bent and now came up with his old friend, the yellow floor bucket. She dumped it over the flames. He was screaming. Screaming. The pain! The goddess! The pain! Oh, Africa! She stood looking at him, at the darkening bloody sheet, with vague consternation. Her face was the face of a woman who hears on her radio that an earthquake has killed 10,000 people in Pakistan or Turkey. "You'll be all right, Paul," she said, but her voice was suddenly frightened. Her eyes began to dart aimlessly around as they had when it seemed that the fire of his burning book might get out of control. They suddenly fixed on something, almost with relief. "I'll just get rid of the trash." She picked up his foot. Its toes were still spasming. She carried it across the room. By the time she got to the door, they had stopped moving. He could see a scar on the instep and remembered how he had gotten that, how he had stepped on a piece of bottle when he was just a kid. Had that been at Revere Beach? Yes, he thought it had been. He remembered he had cried, and his father had told him it was just a little cut. His father had told him to stop acting like someone had cut his goddamn foot off. Annie paused at the door and looked back at Paul, who shrieked and writhed in the charred and blood-soaked bed. His face was a deathly fading white. "Now you're hobbled," she said. "And don't you blame me. It's your own fault." She went out. So did Paul. Dun dun dun.